At the Donna Adelson trial this week, her daughter Wendy says she doesn't know anything.
Were you in any way involved in the plot to kill your ex-husband?
No.
Did you maybe know it was going to happen but not know the details?
I did not know it was going to happen, and I did not know any details.
And Wendy gives us a reason why the police might suspect her.
Or you were worried, I guess, in the police car on the way to be interviewed, that you might be considered a suspect.
Because I couldn't think of anything bad going on in his life other than the divorce. And frequently the ex-wife is a suspect.
Wendy's words don't add up. And then there's her brother, Robert. What he said about Donna's reaction to Dan Markel's murder, I don't think he realised he was revealing. In this episode, I'll show you exactly where the contradictions are and why both Wendy and Robert's testimony might say more than they intended. Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you're new to this, what I do here is different from anywhere else. Every time I strip away everything apart from the words that are said by the people at the centre of the story. Then I use my process of statement investigation to give you the key to seeing deception, where the truth is, and also what the motivations of the person talking might be. It's a process that I use with investigators, with corporate clients, and with the media to get a deep understanding of what is being said. So, Donna Adelson on trial in connection with the murder of her ex-son-in-law, Dan Markel. Now, I'm going to look here and breaking down two of the most important bits of testimony we got this week. That is her daughter, Wendi Adelson, ex-wife of Dan Markel, the murder victim, and also her son, Robert Adelson. I don't think Robert's spoken before at one of these trials, so what he has to say is especially interesting. But let's start with Wendi Adelson. And for both Wendy and Robert, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things. Do they answer the question that they're being asked? Do they directly take on the question they're being asked? Or do they jump off the row a little bit? Do they go sideways? Do they dodge? Do they just not take on specifically what is being asked? That'll be instructive. Look for them going extra. That is when you're asked a question and you give a full answer to that question and then you say something else. That indicates what is important for that person to say. It's such a priority for them. They feel the need to get it out without being asked about it. That indicates what's going on in their head. And let's just look for some signs of being honest from Wendy and from Robert. Are you ready? Let's dive into the courtroom and hear from Wendi Adelson.
When was the last time you spoke to your mother, Donna Adelson, as we sit here today?
November of 2023.
Okay. And so she hasn't given you any information or advice about how to testify in court, has
No,
she?
ma'am. No.
What about, you did offer testimony in November of 2023 as well, right, on a related case?
Yes,
Okay.
October.
And did your mom, when you spoke to her in November of 2023, offer you any advice or thoughts about how you should act or behave or what you should say in court?
Yes,
She did.
she did.
And what was that?
I can't tell you I remember exactly, but she was hoping I would be supportive of my brother.
Okay. And do you know what her thoughts were afterwards?
I do.
Okay. And what were they?
She was devastated.
She didn't feel you were supportive.
No.
Right, Wendy is asked, first of all, when was the last time you spoke to your mother, Donna Adelson, as we sit here today? And Wendy says November of 2023. It's a 3-word answer. It's a very short answer. It does take on the question, directly takes on the question. All those things point to this being truthful, that Wendy hasn't spoken to her mother since November of 2023. There's no storytelling, there's no persuasion. It deals directly with what is being asked. So I would say that's what the truth sounds like when it comes from Wendy. It's very direct, it's to the question, and it's very short. She's then asked, okay, so she hasn't given you any information or advice about how to testify in court. And Wendy says, no, ma'am, no. Now, again, that sounds very honest. It's a yes or no question. She says no. She says no twice. Now, normally I would say, are you trying too hard to make us believe that you mean no by repeating no? But actually, if you listen back, the prosecutor steps over her a little bit. So I think she's saying no for clarity there. So Wendy in truthful mode here. For whatever reason, maybe she's always in truthful mode. Maybe we'll see her deviate a little bit from this. But she seems to be in truthful mode. Short answers, directly answering the question. What about, did you offer testimony in November of 2023 as well, right, on a related case is the question. Yes, October, says Wendy. Again, yes to the question, very straightforward. She does say October instead of November. Maybe she's just trying to be really correct. She's then asked, and did your mom, when you spoke to her in November of 2023, offer you any advice or thoughts about how you should act or behave or what you should say in court? Wendy says, yes. It's a yes-no question. We might be expecting a little bit more, but Wendy's game is just to give the bare minimum here. And it really helps to give, if you're giving the bare minimum, for it to be truthful. Just say yes. So she does answer the question, but she's not going to be helpful and give the prosecutors any more to work with, even though she's played this game before. She's an attorney herself. She knows that she's going to be asked for the details here. She's not going to provide them without being asked. In other words, it's not important for her to say she's not going extra and offering more right now. The prosecutor says she did. Wendy confirms she did. So now here comes a question, which Wendy knew was coming, so why she tried to avoid it, I don't know. And what was that? Wendy's full answer to that is very different. It's not short. It's not 2-3 words anymore. It's longer. She says, I can't tell you I remember exactly, but she was hoping I would be supportive of my brother. Now we've got something to work with. I can't tell you I remember exactly. Now, Wendy played a lot in her testimony about the fact she couldn't remember things. Even when she knew she was going to be reminded by transcripts and pages of a folder in front of her, Wendy would go to, I can't remember. It's very hard to disprove what someone remembers or prove what someone remembers. So she sits in this comfort of not remembering things a lot. It seems to be helpful to her. Here it is. I can't tell you I remember exactly. So let's go with that. I remember exactly before. So that is her saying, she does remember quite a lot, but she's decided to tell you, I'm going to tell you what I can't tell you here. I'm going to tell you that there are things I'm not going to tell you. I can't remember exactly. I do remember some things, but I'm going to tell you I don't remember everything. Don't push me for any more in this, because I'm going to say I don't remember. And also, it's I can't tell you I remember exactly. Not I don't remember exactly, which would be more direct and more solid. It's I can't tell you I remember exactly, i.e. I'm telling you I don't remember. What she's doing here is putting some, I think, is weaselly words in there. I think she can remember exactly, but I can't tell you that I remember exactly, i.e. I'm not going to tell you exactly what I remember. But she was hoping I would be supportive of my brother. Supportive, I think, is doing a lot of work there in that sentence. I think that there was a lot more about what was demanded by Donna of Wendy in the trial of Charlie. Support. Listen, I've had a close family member on trial. I was a witness there. I don't think my mum even said anything to me about what it was I should say, but I know her pretty well. She would have said, be truthful. They can't fight the truth. They can't argue with the truth. They can't catch you out when you tell the truth. I think that's where she would have gone. But no, Donna wanted support. But what does that mean? I bet she was a lot more prescriptive than just saying, please be supportive of your brother. I think there was more said there, which Wendy has boiled down to this very nice word, supportive of my brother. Listen, when you're in court giving testimony, you're supposed to be truthful. Not supportive, not unsupportive. You're supposed to be truthful. And she refers to Charlie as my brother. She refers to Charlie as my brother all the way through the extracts we're going to look at. What is that? Is this Wendy distancing herself from Charlie, who's been convicted in relation to the murder and is serving a life sentence? Is that why she wants to get this distance? I'm not like him. He's at arm's length. He's not Charlie, nice and close and cuddly. He's my brother at arm's length. Or does she feel disgust for him and she can't bring herself to? She doesn't feel close to him at all. She feels disgust and she refers to him as my brother rather than a closer name like Charlie. The prosecutor then says, okay, and do you know what her thoughts were afterwards? Wendy says, I do, because she's going back to her way of answering here, which is very short but truthful answers, but not giving anything to work with. Next is asked, okay, what were they? And Wendy says she was devastated. Now, the question was about Donna's thoughts. The question was, let's just get it up again. Do you know what her thoughts were afterwards? Wendy says, I do. What were they? I.e., what were her thoughts? And Wendy says she was devastated. Now, that might be truthful. Donna may well have been devastated at Wendy's testimony in court, but that's Donna's feelings, not her thoughts. Wendy is hiding a little bit there from us and just saying that Donna was devastated, but she hasn't taken the question on entirely. So I think there's a lot more to know about what Donna's feelings were after Wendy had testified last time. She didn't feel you were supportive, asks the question, and Wendy says no. Once again, short, truthful, I believe, but very, very to the point. So here, in this first question and answer session that we've looked at from Wendy, listen, I think this is a good chance to see what honest Wendy looks like. She doesn't give too much information. She's creating some distance. There's qualifications in what she says. There's some half answers that don't really take on the question, but you see that pattern of very short, succinct, and I believe truthful answers from Wendy. That's what Wendy looks like when she's telling the truth. We're going to see her deviate from that pattern as we go. And also, I think I've spotted a huge contradiction in Wendy's testimony, something I don't think that she meant to do. So pay attention when you're listening to the words of Wendy as we go through this. See if you can spot it too as we listen to more of Wendy in court.
Were you in any way involved in the plot to kill your ex-husband?
No.
Did you maybe know it was going to happen but not know the details?
I did not know it was going to happen, and I did not know any details.
Did you provide any information, even unknowingly in hindsight, that you think could have been used to assist the murderers?
I don't think so. I didn't provide any information.
What information do you have regarding your mother's involvement in the plot to kill your ex-husband?
I don't have information.
But you do admit that your brother said he looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel.
I don't. I admit that my brother made a tasteless joke repeatedly about buying me a TV because it was cheaper than hiring a hitman.
But then someone did hire a hitman who did kill Dan Markel, right?
Yes, that happened.
I think that is stone cold there from Wendy. Let's break down what she said. Were you in any way involved in the plot to kill your ex-husband, she says. And Wendy's answer is no. Now, that's the pattern we've seen before. Short answer. There's no content to it. It's just a no, not no, I wasn't involved. It's just a no. So it's slightly different from some of those answers like November 2023, where she gave it a time. There was content in the answer. There's no content there apart from the denial, but it is very short and it does answer the question. So let's go on and see if we can get any more data points. Did you maybe know it was going to happen? She's asked. Did you maybe know it was going to happen but did not know the details? And she says, I did not know it was going to happen and I did not know any details. Two non-contracted did nots there. In conversation, we tend to say, I didn't. I didn't know it was going to happen and I didn't know any details. Wendy's gone for the much more formal, I did not know. Now, why do people do that? Well, sometimes they speak formally. Maybe Wendy is a formal speaker and she talks like that all the time. She doesn't often slip into things like didn't, wouldn't, couldn't. She would say the full thing. Maybe that is her natural way of talking. Liars use it as well because they believe that when they talk more formally and they say the full words, they will be believed more because it sounds more serious. It sounds like they're being really serious and committed to what they're saying because they're not using the slangy didn'ts, but they're using the more formal did not. Plus, it just means more. Did not means a little bit more than didn't. Why is she using it? Let's look through it and see if we can work out, is she a formal speaker or does she use these more contracted terms at times? I did not know it was going to happen and I did not know any details. Now, this doesn't answer the question. Did you maybe know it was going to happen but not know the details was the question, i.e., did you know it was going to happen but you knew no details? I did not know it was going to happen directly answers what she's asked. I did not know any details is not taking the question on, because the question assumes that she doesn't know any details. If this is what has been going on, that Wendy knew there was a plot but didn't know anything about it, when it was going to happen, who was going to do it or anything like that. She didn't know the details. But Wendy seems to be going to maybe a prepared answer, something she's thought about before, which is, I did not know it was going to happen. I did not know any details, which is why her answer doesn't match the question. And why would you prepare answers? Why wouldn't you just go to court knowing the truth and being willing to just tell the truth as you know it, to listen to the question and answer the question you're asked to be as helpful as possible? Why would you need prepared answers? This looks like a prepared answer to me because it doesn't quite match the question. The next question is, did you provide any information, even unknowingly in hindsight, that you think could have been used to assist the murderers? And now Wendy is really out of this pattern. She says, I don't think so. I didn't provide any information. So here we've got two contractions. I don't think so and I didn't provide any information. Not I do not think so and I did not provide any information. So she's outside of her pattern a little bit here. I don't think so is not a certainty. It's a belief, which is absolutely fine. But you'll notice it's much less certain than everything that's been there before. Did you provide any information? I don't think so. Is also, I could have, but not to my belief, not to my knowledge, but I'm open to the idea that this could have happened. And then she says, I didn't provide any information. Now that's really wide. That's an absolute. I didn't provide any information. We talk in absolutes all the time when we don't really mean them. I've never done that. You have done it. You just want to talk in this absolute to convince people that you've never done it. You might mean you did it rarely, but I've never done that. Or I'm totally furious when you're a little bit mad. Those are the sort of deceptive absolutes that we use. When we use absolutes, they can very rarely be true. I mean, what's Donna saying here anyway? Because she doesn't say any information that could have been used to assist the murder. She doesn't finish the question part off. She just says, I didn't provide any information. Well, she's told us that she did provide information to her mum about where Dan was. Not to assist with a murder, but she would tell her mum where Dan was, what his movements were, and her mum would also know Dan's movements from what Wendy's movements were. She said that in testimony, so she did provide the information. She may believe that her mum didn't do anything with that information, and she may believe she wasn't deliberately giving information, but that's not what she says there. She says, I didn't provide any information. What, about anything? Ever? Well, that's what that answer says, and it can't be true. So why is she giving an answer that just cannot be true? Why is she not giving something that's a bit more nuanced and a bit more true? Again, I think it is all about sticking to this script, which is nothing at all to do with me. I've got to deny, deny, deny. What information do you have regarding your mother's involvement in the plot to kill your ex-husband? Big question there. She says, I don't have information. We've got don't there again. It's not I do not have information. She's used the contraction again. I don't have information. And have information, again, she hasn't finished it off. Remember when you did English classes and your English teacher said, yeah, your answer needs to fill everything from the question. Is, where were you today? Out. No, I was out today. You have to give the full answer. Now, we don't treat life like that, but the more content there is in an answer, the more believable it is. The more it refers to the question that we've been asked, the more believable it is. I don't have information, again, is this blanket denial. I don't have information. You do, because you've heard stuff in court. Surely you've heard stuff in court. You do. It's not believable again, this 100% absolute. She's then asked, but you do admit that your brother said he looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel. And Wendy stutters here. She's been very clear so far. When we stutter, it's stress, especially when we stutter on the word I. She says, I don't. When we stutter on the word I, it means psychologically we're having a hard time connecting ourselves with I and what we're going to say next, for whatever reason, but it is very often a lie. And she says, I don't. I admit that my brother, not calling him Charlie again, my brother made a tasteless joke repeatedly about buying me a TV because it was cheaper than hiring a hitman. She's protecting someone there with that answer. Is she protecting herself in that I only ever heard jokes? Or is she protecting Charlie? Well, that would be dumb because he's already locked up. So she's protecting herself there with that answer, that I only will admit to hearing the jokes. Will you admit to the other stuff? I mean, again, it's a qualified answer. She has not taken on, do you admit your brother said he looked into hiring a hitman to kill Dan Markel? If she hadn't heard that, surely she would say, I do not admit to hearing my brother say that. Instead, she goes the other way and talks about something else entirely that is not in the question. And then she's asked, but someone did hire a hitman who did kill Dan Markel, right? And she says, yes, that happened. That happened. That is your ex-husband. Someone hired a hitman to kill your ex-husband. That is the father of your children. Someone hired a hitman to kill the father of your children. I mean, that's put to you that this happened. You just go, yeah, that happened. There's no regret. There's no remorse. There's no anger. There's no desire for justice in there at all. Very cold and very factual. Yes, that happened. It's not a lie, but just boiling that terrible, terrible lifetime event for both you and your children into that. There's a level of coldness there for me. So in this section here, we're definitely seeing prepared answers and why the need for those prepared answers if everything's open and above board. And this, I don't think so, to the did you pass information on really opens me to the fact that she could have passed information on. In her head, she thinks she could have passed information on deliberately, unavoidably, naively. I don't know, but in her head, she feels she could have passed that information on. Listen, if Wendy's fascinating, her brother Robert, I don't think he's testified at one of these trials before, but he did testify this week. What he has to say about family dynamics is riveting, and he is coming up when we're done with Wendy, so stay here to get the lowdown on Robert Adelson. But back to the courtroom and back to Wendy.
Was part of the plot to kill your ex for you to have plausible deniability or to know very little about it?
I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny.
Were you shielded from the plot because, I don't know, you couldn't be trusted to keep a secret?
I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny.
So there we have just two questions. Was part of the plot to kill your ex for you to have plausible deniability or to know very little about it? And she says, I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny. We've gone formal again. I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny. Were you shielded from the plot because, I don't know, they could not trust you to keep a secret? I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny. You notice it? It's the exact same wording, two answers to a question. It's like a robot that's only got a few answers programmed into it. Again, it's an absolute. Again, this feels like a prepared answer. And notice that the first time she's asked, the answer is kind of appropriate to the question. Was part of the plot to kill your ex for you to have plausible deniability or to know very little about it? Now, if you were not part of the plot, if you were not involved in any plot, then I don't know. I do not know of any plot. Instead, she says, I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny. She doesn't quite take on the question, but the answer is kind of appropriate to what she says. Were you shielded from the plot because you could not be trusted to keep a secret? I was not involved in any plot to kill Danny. Completely irrelevant to the question that is asked. It's the same words as she's given before, like this prepared, memorized answer. An absolute, I was not involved. And it's really, were you shielded from the plot because you could not be trusted to keep a secret? I don't know. If they couldn't trust me to keep a secret, I didn't know there was a plot going on. If there was a plot, I was not part of it. That would be more taking on the question and actually dealing with what you've been asked. However, she doesn't want to do that. For some reason, she doesn't want to open herself up and relax herself and just answer truthfully. She wants to go to these prepared answers. So in that very short extract, we've got the prepared answers again. Also, I think she is caught out by not having an answer to the second question. I think she's ready for the first one. Were you involved in a plot, or were you shielded from it to have deniability? But the second one, I think you could not be trusted. She may not well have planned for that one properly. Now, do you ever feel like you're not being told the full story? Just like Wendy isn't doing here, is she? Well, you're right. It's happening all the time. Maybe not in as serious a situation as this, but it's happening all around us. And I'm here to giving you the key to seeing deeper, because this is about hearing the world with new ears. And I'm on a mission to share this skill with as many people as possible. So if you want to unlock that secret, subscribe to this channel or follow this podcast, join the movement and dive into the archives. You want to look into the Adelsons, you can do that. You want to look into people giving testimony in court, you can do that as well. There's so much waiting to be explored. And do you know someone who needs this, someone who deserves to hear the truth in their lives? Then do hit the like button. That helps this get out to many, many more people. Comment on this, share it, pass it on. Every single click, every single share, it fuels the fire for never a truer word. It allows me to dig deeper, analyze further, and bring this life-changing skill to more people. This week, so many people getting into this because of the Donna Adelson trial, saying, oh my God, I never noticed that people do that all around me just now, or I'm learning so much from you. So that is great to hear. But also, isn't that a great thing to pass on? So like, share, recommend. It is a great gift to give. Let's go back into the courtroom and hear more from Wendy on the stand.
Why did you tell investigator Isom in your law enforcement interview that you were worried the police, or you were worried, I guess, in the police car on the way to be interviewed, that you might be considered a suspect?
Because I couldn't think of anything bad going on in his life other than the divorce. And frequently the ex-wife is a suspect.
Were you treated as a suspect?
I was not.
But you mentioned 9 times in your law enforcement interview being a suspect, didn't you?
I did, yes.
When you were approached at the restaurant, you weren't yet told that this was a shooting, were you?
I was not.
You were only told something happened with your ex-husband.
I don't even know if I was told that. I was very scared something happened to my kids, and that's why law enforcement was there, and they wouldn't tell me what was going on.
But they did reassure you that the kids were fine. You remember
They told me
that?
that law enforcement officers were with the children, which terrified me because I didn't know why my children would need law enforcement officers.
So you didn't know what this was about at all when you were in the police car?
In the car, they told me.
Okay. In the car, they told you what?
They said, your ex-husband has been shot.
Okay. So that you learned that information prior to getting into the interview room?
Yes.
Okay.
This is one of the most revealing bits of testimony I think Wendy gives from a looking at what she says point of view. She's asked, you were worried, I guess, in the police car on the way to be interviewed that you might be considered a suspect. And Wendy's reply is, because I couldn't think of anything bad going on in his life other than the divorce. And frequently the ex-wife is a suspect. Now, that's fine. The ex-wife is a suspect. That's absolutely fine. But she ties it to anything bad going on in Dan Markel's life. Why does she assume it was a targeted killing aimed at or from someone who had something bad going on with him? Why did she think it was something bad that led to Dan's murder? Why did she not think, was it a drive-by shooting, a carjacking, someone mentally unstable running amok with a gun or something like that? Instead, she immediately jumped to the assumption that it was someone who had something bad going on with Dan, or someone that Dan had something bad going on with, and that was only her. Remember that. She couldn't think of anything bad going on in his life other than the divorce. That is what she says then in court. The assumption that it was a targeted killing and she couldn't think of anything bad in his life other than the divorce. She's asked, were you treated as a suspect? Short answers are back. I was not. Now, was she treated as a suspect or not? I don't know, but in her pattern, I was not is not I wasn't. So she's being formal again. So did she feel like she was being treated as a suspect and she's lying? Or did she just want to give this really emphatic I was not? Or was she not treated as a suspect? Don't know, but her formal language pattern is back again. Then look at the stress coming from Wendy. But you mentioned 9 times in your law enforcement interview being a suspect, didn't you? And she says, I did. Yes. Now, all the way through testimony, when she's asked directly what she says, she goes, I don't remember. And I'm surprised here that she didn't say, I don't know how many times I said it. And then it would be brought to her attention. Look, 9 times you said it. There's the 9 times that you said you were a suspect. Instead, she just agrees with it. Her pattern has been broken. Her safety response has been broken. This is what happens under stress. And the stress is coming out in the I did, yes. Where you'll know yourself, you maybe have got to have a conversation with someone and you'll be, I'll keep my cool, I'll take a breath before I talk, I'll listen to what they have to say, I'll keep my breathing under control so I don't get angry. And you start off like that, but your stress rises and you forget all those things you've said to yourself and you snap. Is that what's happened here? I did, yes. When it's brought up to her, how many times in her law enforcement interview she mentioned being a suspect? When you were approached at the restaurant, you weren't told yet this was a shooting, were you? I was not, she says. That formal language is back again. You were only told something had happened with your husband. I don't even know if I was told that, she said. So again, you were only told something happened to your husband. I don't even know if I was told that. You know what you were told. I was very scared something happened to my kids, and that's why law enforcement was there, and they wouldn't tell me what was going on. Well, wait a minute. They wouldn't tell you what was going on, or you don't even know if you were told that. The two things don't really hang together, Wendy, do they? You're trying to paint a picture at the time, and what I think that picture she's trying to paint is some of the things I said then might not have been logical or rational or sane because I was very scared. She's pulled out the mom card there as well. It was around the kids, so everyone can identify with people being scared around their kids or scared about their kids. So I think what she's doing here, because these two things don't hang together. I don't even know what I was told. They wouldn't tell me what was going on. Can't both be true, really, but I think it's that bit in the middle. I was very scared something was happening with my kids that is important for her to get across. Look, these things might not make sense. It might even seem suspicious, but really I was saying them because in the moment, I was scared. I was terrified. It's not often she talks about emotions, but she is at this point. When it serves Wendy to talk about something, she'll talk about it. The prosecutor says, but they did reassure you the kids were fine. They told me that law enforcement officers were with the children, which terrified me because I didn't know why my children would need law enforcement officers. That doesn't answer the question. They did reassure you the kids were fine. She doesn't say, yes, they did, because I don't know, I wasn't there. But my guess is they would say the kids are fine. The kids are fine. There's something else up. They told me law enforcement officers were with my kids, which terrified me. Again, I think this is just to get across the fact I was terrified. So if I said things that don't add up or don't quite work out for you or don't sound good, it's because I wasn't thinking clearly at the time because I was concerned about my kids. I was terrified and I was scared. The prosecutor says, so you didn't know this was all about when you were in the police car? She says, in the car, they told me. Okay, in the car, they told you what? They said, your ex-husband has been shot, says Wendy. Now, this is an interesting one. She's not downplaying what happened to Dan. Not saying that, Dan was in hospital or anything like that. She's actually gone full frontal with your ex-husband has been shot. Quite often, guilty people will turn down the severity of what's happened. So if it's a murder, they'll say it was an attack. If something was stolen, they'll say something was taken, etc., etc. But she doesn't do any of that downplaying there. So you learned that information prior to getting into the interview room, and Wendy says, yes. Very direct answer there. I think this is, Wendy's truth pattern there. There's a large pause before the prosecutor says okay at the end of that. I wonder what she was thinking then. I don't know. If you do know, do let me know in the comments. Why was that pause there? I felt there was something more going on that I wasn't attuned to there with that pause before the okay. I analyse words, pauses, much harder for me. So this is very revealing. Here, I want you to remember, she assumed it was a targeted killing. Her first thought was this was a targeted killing, not a random attack. She's talking about being seen as a suspect is sensitive to her. We've got that I. She wants to tell us why it happened was because she was scared and terrified about the kids. She attempts to put her mentioning of that down to confusion caused by the police. I was a suspect, or I was talking about being a suspect, but only because of how the police were. It was nothing to do with the fact that I should be a suspect. But do remember the line, I couldn't think of anything bad going on with Dan apart from the divorce. I couldn't think of anything bad going on with Dan apart from the divorce, because in the next bit, see if you can spot the contradiction. And also, don't forget, Rob is still on the way. And I think he gives the game away on the family more than he ever meant to. But here's some more from Wendy.
Do you remember allowing law enforcement to take possession of your computer in that interview?
I told law enforcement to search my phone, search my computer, search my house, search my car. I was trying to be helpful.
Do you remember saying that it was okay for them to take the computer and keep it even though you had work things on there because you didn't think you would be going back to work?
I remember thinking it wasn't important. I couldn't imagine. My life fell apart.
But you didn't go back to work, did you, at FSU?
I did actually go back. Not physically present, but I was still on the FSU payroll until December of that year.
Okay. In that interview with law enforcement, did you suggest that your parents are people who may have been angry enough to kill Dan Markel?
I suggested a lot of people who could have been angry enough to kill Danny.
And were some of the people my parents?
Yes.
Right. Wendy says what Wendy wants to say, what serves her best. We'll look into that. By the way, I am doing daily breakdowns on this trial, so if you subscribe to this channel, you will get those as well as the weekly breakdowns. At the end of the week, I'll get the best testimony from the week, like this, and break down what is truly being said in some of that testimony. The prosecutor says to Wendy, do you remember allowing law enforcement to take possession of your computer in that interview? And Wendy doesn't say, yes, I do, which is her pattern, as we know. She wants to say more here, which is self-serving, because she wants to get across just how helpful she's been. And would an innocent person not be helpful? Would a guilty person not be obstructive? That's what she's playing with here. So she wants to show how helpful she's being. Why does she want to show how helpful she's being? Why doesn't she just say yes? Wait for the next question. I told law enforcement to search my phone, so I told them to do it. I was so helpful, I told them what to do. I told law enforcement to search my phone, search my computer, search my house, search my car. Good on you, Wendy. I was trying to be helpful, is what she says. So, a very simple question. Do you remember allowing law enforcement to take possession of your computer in that interview? And she turns it into a look how helpful I have been, self-serving answer. Do you remember saying it was okay for them to take your computer and keep, even though you had work things on there because you didn't think you would be going back to work? Now, Wendy doesn't answer that question. She doesn't say, yes, I remember that, or no, I don't remember that. She says, I remember thinking it wasn't important. Wasn't. She's used the contracted term again. I remember thinking it wasn't important. I couldn't. Contracted term again. I couldn't imagine my life fell apart, so. So my life fell apart. Well, that's interesting because, yeah, her life has fallen apart since then. Her brother's in jail. Her mother's on a murder trial. The kid's dad has died. But none of those things had happened at this time. So her life hadn't fallen apart. This is with hindsight. So she's trying to persuade us again. It's not quite true. She's trying to give an answer that serves Wendy. She could say, yeah, I do remember that, or no, I don't remember that. Instead, she gives an explanation. I remember thinking my computer wasn't important. I couldn't imagine my life fell apart. Well, at that point, it hadn't. It has now. So again, it's a self-serving answer. Then the prosecutor says, but you didn't go back to work, did you, at FSU? And Wendy's answer is, I did actually go back, not physically present, but I was still on the FSU payroll until December of that year. I can't tell from that answer if she went back to work or not. It makes it sound like she was on long-term sick leave or something like that, still getting paid. I was on the payroll. It's very different from I actually did work. I did go back, not back, but I'm still on the payroll. That doesn't sound like back to me, but I don't know. Did she go back or not? Why can't she just give a straight answer? I continued to work at FSU for the rest of the year remotely, or something like that. I don't know why she can't give a straight answer to that question. In that interview with law enforcement, did you suggest that your parents are people who may have been angry enough to kill Dan Markel? And she doesn't answer the question again. Yes, I did. Is the truthful answer to that? I've seen the interview. Yes, I did. She says, I suggested a lot of people who could have been angry enough to kill Danny. So she doesn't answer the question. She's protecting her parents here because she did say that. Instead, she says, I suggested a lot of people who could have been angry enough to kill Danny. Now, why does she want to protect her parents here? Why does she not want to go, yes, I did? But also, I suggested a lot of people who could have been angry enough to kill Danny. But way back when, previously, I couldn't think of anything bad going on in his life. Is what she said. That's why she thought she might be a suspect, because there were no other suspects. There was no one obvious that might want to kill Dan Markel. All of a sudden now, when it suits her, when it serves her, she suggested a lot of people who could have been angry enough to kill Danny. Now, I don't know your personal definitions here, but mine certainly, if someone is angry enough to kill someone, then that is something bad going on in someone's life. So this massive contradiction. Wendy is giving answers that suit Wendy, that serve Wendy. So when it suits her to say, I couldn't think of anyone that was a suspect, therefore I was worried people would think it was me, she'll say that. When it's said to her, you suggested your mom and dad could have been involved in the plot to kill Dan Markel, she says, I suggested a lot of people who could have been angry enough to kill Danny. Contradiction there that I think is huge and really speaks to her credibility as a witness. And were some of those people my parents? She says yes at that point. So here, she is curating that image of helpfulness that we saw. Why do you need to curate that? Conflicting answers that she gives. All along the way, she's giving conflicting answers depending on what works best for Wendy. And she attempts to avoid a blatant truth. She did suggest her parents might have been mad enough to kill Danny in the interview. But instead of just admitting to that blatant truth, she attempts to avoid it. So what more does Wendy know that makes her want to avoid that? Okay, let's look at Robert Adelson now. I thought he was very truthful. I watched his testimony and I thought I'd be including it in this episode as a bit of an example of how truthful people talk. Now, he goes extra a lot, so he answers the question and then says more, which I thought was pent up feelings that have been built up for a long time, and finally he's got a chance to let it all out, and that's why he goes extra. However, he may still be doing that, but what he says when he goes extra, oh boy, it is revealing. Have a listen and see if you can spot it when we listen to Robert Adelson.
After the murder of Dan Markel, did Donna Adelson seem curious about who killed Dan Markel?
No.
Was there a complete lack of curiosity?
Yeah, nobody seemed curious.
Did you actually ever ask her, like after the murder, like, hey, like, what do you think happened? What do you...
Yeah, and the conversations were kind of rerouted, or that was certainly discouraged, and it was probably like maybe sometime like mid-August, when I finally had a chance to ask and say, what is going on? This was not a small event. This was getting a lot of notoriety, and I said, what do you guys think happened? And she had said, I don't know and I don't care. It doesn't concern me.
Was that out of character for her to not be curious and not be asking some questions?
Yeah, I mean, it was an unsolved murder of, my former brother-in-law, like someone that we all know very well. I mean, if it was like some neighborhood gossip, people would be interested. This was like national interest, and nobody had any curiosity about, who did this to Danny.
Is a person, you mentioned that, not only is it your brother-in-law, but it was like national news at that point as well.
Yes.
And regardless of it being national news or not, I mean, is a person dying from gun violence an extremely unusual thing to happen in your family?
Yeah, I mean, to this day, Danny's the only person that I know who's died from gun violence or been a victim of gun violence. So it's unique in that manner.
What would your mom, Donna Adelson, do if you did try to ask her any more about Danny's murder after that?
It wasn't a subject for discussion. It would be rerouted, or it was just not a subject to discuss.
When you say rerouted, do you mean like changing the subject?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, now, sometimes you need to remember it's Donna Adelson on trial here, because it feels like it could be Wendy on trial or even Charlie on trial again, but it's Donna on trial, which is acknowledged in the first question that we look at that Robert is answering here. After the murder of Dan Markel, did Donna Adelson seem curious about who killed Dan Markel? So he says no. Straightforward, direct there, just that no. Donna was not curious. Then he's asked, was there a complete lack of curiosity? And he says, yeah, nobody seemed curious. Now notice he was talking about Donna at first. He's asked about Donna. Did Donna seem curious about who killed Dan Martel? No. Was there a complete lack of curiosity? Well, Donna's still the subject of the question here. And he says, yeah, nobody seemed curious. Not she didn't seem curious, but nobody seemed curious. Now, who is that nobody? It's kind of got to be his family, hasn't it? I mean, it really has got to be his family that he's talking about. Donna and others. What he's saying there, in his own words, is not just that Donna wasn't curious, but nobody was curious. And by nobody, he's got to mean more than Donna, and more likely his family. Did you ever ask her, so again, this is about Donna, did you ever ask her, like after the murder, hey, what do you think happened? He says, yeah. There's your answer. Yeah, I did. And then he goes extra and says what those things are. This is, I think, him being helpful and giving an answer with more context. Also, he's going extra. This is important for him to say, and I think this is some of the pent out things coming out. And the conversations were kind of rerouted, or were certainly discouraged. Those are two sort of different things. Kind of rerouted is a little bit vague. What does that mean? Does it go somewhere else, or we talk about it but we don't really talk about it? Is that what kind of rerouted means? But certainly discouraged is much stronger. In fact, that makes it sound like he was told not to ask. Do not talk about this at all. That's not rerouted. That is discouraged. But it's two very different things. I think the second strong one is interesting. Was he told explicitly not to talk about it? Because that would be certainly discouraged. They were certainly discouraged. And it was probably like maybe around sometime in mid-August, when I finally had a chance to ask and say, what is going on? This was not a small event. This was getting a lot of notoriety. Now, this is mid-August, so this is sometime after the shooting. And he says, what is going on? Not what was going on, not what happened to Danny. What is going on at the current time when he was talking, which was mid-August after the shooting? What is going on? So I think he felt a sense at the very least, maybe he knew more, but he felt a sense at the very least that something was still going on. It wasn't the fact that something had happened, which was the murder of Dan Markel. It was that something is going on. He had that sense there. I think that comes through when he was talking. He then continues and says, I said, what do you guys think happened? And she had said, I don't know and I don't care. It doesn't concern me. So we've got him talking about she. She said, I don't know, I don't care, it doesn't concern me. So that's Donna talking. But you notice the question wasn't to his mom, what do you think happened? It's what do you guys think happened? So he was talking in a wider sense. He was talking to his family. And Donna said, I don't know, I don't care, it doesn't concern me. So again, he's letting us know through his language that there was more than just Donna involved in these conversations where the murder of Dan Markel wasn't spoken about. It was actually discouraged. The prosecutor says to Robert, was that out of character for her not to be curious and not to be asking questions? And he says, yeah, it was the unsolved murder of, my former brother-in-law. Spoke earlier about people downplaying what happened. Now, I'm not suggesting for a second Robert is involved, so would downplay it. What I just want you to know is Here's an innocent person talking about the slaying of someone close to him, and he calls it a murder. He doesn't downplay it to attack or assault or anything like that, or crime. He says it was the unsolved murder of, my former brother-in-law, like someone that we know very well. I mean, if it was like some neighbourhood gossip, people would be interested. There was a national interest, and nobody had any curiosity about, who did this to Danny. Nobody, again, it's not Donna didn't have this curiosity. I think Donna is part of the nobody. But again, I think he is implicating that his family were all the same here. His family were not talking about this. His family, all of them, had no curiosity because he's widening it out beyond Donna. He's not stating who it is. Is a person, you mentioned that, is your brother-in-law. This was like national news as well, yes. And regardless of it being national news or not, I mean, as a person dying from gun violence, an extremely unusual thing to happen in your family. He says, yes, I mean, to this day, Dan's the only person I know who's died from gun violence or been a victim of gun violence. The straight talking about the crime, again, gun violence, not this has happened to or anything. He doesn't play it down. It's a real useful data point for the future when you hear someone talk things down. So it's unique in that matter. What would your mom, Donna Adelson, do if you did try to ask her a little more about Danny's murder after that? He says it wasn't a subject for discussion, It would be rerouted or, it was just not a subject to discuss. So it was not a subject to discuss. That feels, again, like some barrier was put up a little bit more than rerouting, which is, I don't know. Did you see this is on TV tonight? That would be rerouting to me. Not a subject to discuss would be, do not ask me about this, or we do not talk about that in this house, or something like that. So I think he knows a barrier was put up, and wow, certainly he leaks that more than Donna avoided the conversations about Dan Markel. Now, who could that be? It could be Donna, who's on trial in connection with the murder. It could be Charlie, who's in jail, in prison, in connection with the murder. Does that involve Wendy? Does that involve Harvey? Are they part of this family group too? It's really, really possible from Robert's words. He was asked about Donna. He answered for the whole family. So what do I think to them? Look, I think Robert was very revealing. He was very aware in some sense that this is a family plot to kill Dan Markel. His words leak that. Even when he's asked about Donna, he replies for the whole family. And as for Wendy, Wendy says what suits Wendy best in these situations. And you can see that from her words. When she goes long and gives long answers, you can see the things that cause her stress. And you can see where she's quite happy to tell the truth, but not give any more information, like yes, and I do. So that's the wrap up for week number 1 of the Donna Adelson trial. I will be doing daily ones every day throughout the trial. When there's something interesting in someone's words or evidence to pick up, I will be doing updates every single day. So do subscribe to the channel to make sure you don't miss them, or to miss the next weekly update on the Donna Adelson trial. NeverAtruerWord.com, that's the website. On there you'll find links to a whole lot more videos and podcasts, some of them about the Adelson family, if you want to take a deep dive into some of the things that those guys have said and what I make of the things that they have said. You could also sign up to be a member of the monthly newsletter there as well. So that's NeverAtruerWord.com. And we'll see you soon for something new from Never a Truer Word.